The Three Railway Engines. The Sad Story of Henry. Once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain. It went into a tunnel and squeaked through its funnel and wouldn't come out again. The engine's name was Henry. His driver and fireman argued with him, but he would not move. "The rain will spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes," he said. The guard blew his whistle till he had no more breath, and waved his flag till his arms ached, but Henry still stayed in the tunnel and blew steam at him. "I'm not going to spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes for you," he said rudely. The passengers came and argued too, but Henry would not move. A fat director, who was on the train, told the guard to get a rope. "We will pull you out," he said, but Henry only blew steam at him and made him wet. They hooked the rope on and all pulled, except the fat director. "My doctor has forbidden me to pull," he said. They pulled and pulled and pulled, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. Then they tried pushing from the other end. The fat director said, "1, 2, 3, push!" But he didn't help. "My doctor has forbidden me to push," he said. They pushed and pushed and pushed, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. At last another train came. The guard waved his red flag and stopped it. The 2 engine drivers, the 2 firemen and the 2 guards went and argued with Henry. "Look, it has stopped raining," they said. "Yes, but it will begin again soon," said Henry. "And what will become of my green paint with red stripes then?" So they brought the other engine up, and it pushed and puffed and puffed and pushed as hard as it could, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. So they gave up. They told Henry, "We shall leave you here for always and always and always." They took up the old rails, built a wall in front of him, and cut out a new tunnel. Now Henry can't get out, and he watches the trains rushing through the new tunnel. He is very sad, because no one will ever see his lovely green paint with red stripes again. But I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you? Thomas the Tank Engine. Thomas and the Breakdown Train. Every day the fat director came to the station to catch his train, and he always said "Hello" to Thomas. There were lots of trucks in the yard. Different ones came in every day, and Thomas had to push and pull them into their right places. He worked hard. He knew now that he wasn't so clever as he had thought. Besides, the fat director had been kind to him, and he wanted to learn all about trucks so as to be a really useful engine. But on a siding by themselves were some trucks that Thomas was told he mustn't touch. There was a small coach, some flat trucks, and 2 strange things his driver called cranes. "That's the breakdown train," he said. "When there's an accident, the workmen get into the coach, and the engine takes them quickly to help the hurt people and to clear and mend the line. The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and trucks." One day Thomas was in the yard, when he heard an engine whistling, "Help! Help!" and a goods train came rushing through much too fast. The engine, a new one called James, was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire, and smoke and sparks steamed out on each side. "They're pushing me! They're pushing me!" he panted. "On, on, laughed the trucks, and still whistling, "Help! Help!" poor James disappeared under a bridge. "I'd like to teach those trucks a lesson," said Thomas the Tank Engine. Presently a bell rang in the signal box, and a man came running. "James is off the line! The breakdown train! Quickly!" he shouted. So Thomas was coupled on, the workmen jumped into their coach, and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he puffed, and this time he wasn't pretending to be like Gordon, he really meant it. "Bother those trucks and their tricks," he thought. "I hope poor James isn't hurt." They found James and their trucks at a bend in the line. The brake van and the last few trucks were on the rails, but the front ones were piled in a heap. James was in a field with a cow looking at him, and his driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt. "Never mind, James," they said. "It wasn't your fault. It was those wooden brakes they gave you. We always said they were no good." Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled the unhurt trucks out of the way. "Oh dear," they groaned. Serves you right, puffed Thomas crossly. When the men put other trucks on the line, he pulled them away too. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all the afternoon. "This'll teach you a lesson, this'll teach you a lesson," he told the trucks. And they answered, yes it will, in a sad, groany, creaky sort of voice. They left the broken trucks and mended the line. Then with 2 cranes they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. The fat director was waiting anxiously for them. "Well, Thomas," he said kindly, "I've heard all about it, and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and you shall have a branch line all to yourself." "Oh, sir," said Thomas happily. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line all to himself, and puffs proudly backwards and forwards with 2 coaches all day. He is never lonely, because there is always some engine to talk to at the junction. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry, and does not stop, but he never forgets to say "poop poop" to little Thomas, and Thomas always whistles "peep peep" in return. James the Red Engine, Troublesome Trucks. James had not seen the Fat Controller for several days. They left James all alone in the shed, and did not even allow him to go out and push coaches and trucks in the yard. "Oh dear," he thought, "I'll never be allowed out any more. I shall have to stay in this shed for always, and no one will ever see my red coat again. Oh dear, James began to cry. Just then the Fat Controller came along. "I see you are sorry, James," he said. "I hope now that you will be a better engine. You have given me a lot of trouble. People are laughing at my railway, and I do not like that at all." "I am very sorry, sir," said James. "I will try hard to behave." "That's a good engine," said the Fat Controller kindly. "I want you to pull some trucks for me. Run along and find them." So James puffed happily away. "Here are your trucks, James," said a little tank engine. "Have you got some bootlaces ready?" And he ran off laughing rudely. Oh, said the trucks as James backed down on them. "We want a proper engine, not a red monster." James took no notice and started as soon as the guard was ready. Come along, he puffed. We won't, screamed the trucks, but James didn't care, and he pulled the screeching trucks sternly out of the yard. The trucks tried hard to make him give up, but he still kept on. Sometimes their brakes would slip on, and sometimes their axles would run hot. Each time they would have to stop and put the trouble right, and each time James would start again, determined not to let the trucks beat him. Give up, you can't pull us, you can't, called the trucks. I can and I will, puffed James, and slowly but surely he pulled them along the line. At last they saw Gordon's Hill ahead. Look out for trouble, James, warned his driver. We'll go fast and get them up before they know it. Don't let them stop you. So James went faster, and they were soon halfway up the hill. I'm doing it, he panted. But it was hard work. Will the top never come, he thought. When, with a sudden jerk, it all came easier. I've done it, he puffed triumphantly. Hooray, he thought. It's easy now. But his driver shut off steam. They've done it again, he said. We've left our tail behind. The last 10 trucks were running backwards down the hill. The coupling had snapped. But the guard was brave. Very carefully and cleverly he made them stop. Then he got out and walked down the line with his red flag. That's why it was easy, said James as he backed the other trucks carefully down. What silly things trucks are. There might have been an accident. Meanwhile the guard had stopped Edward, who was pulling 3 coaches. Shall I help you, James? Called Edward. No, thank you, answered James. I'll pull them myself. Good, don't let them beat you. So James got ready. Then with a peep peep, he was off. I can do it, he puffed. He pulled and puffed as hard as he could. Peep, peep, peep. You're doing well, whistled Edward, as James slowly struggled up the hill, with clouds of smoke and steam pouring from his funnel. I've done it, he panted, and disappeared over the top. They reached their station safely. James was resting in the yard when Edward was puffed by with a cheerful peep peep. Then, walking towards him across the rails, James saw the Fat Controller. "Oh dear, what will he say?" he asked himself sadly. But the Fat Controller was smiling. "I was in Edward's train and saw everything," he said. "You've made the most troublesome trucks on the line behave. After that, you deserve to keep your red coach." Tank Engine Thomas again. Thomas, Terence and the snow. Autumn was changing the leaves from green to brown. The fields were changing too, from yellow stubble to brown earth. As Thomas puffed along, he heard the chug 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 of a tractor at work. One day, stopping for a signal, he saw the tractor close by. "Hello," said the tractor. "I'm Terence. I'm ploughing." "I'm Thomas. I'm pulling a train." "What ugly wheels you've got." "They're not ugly. They're caterpillars," said Terence. "I can go anywhere. I don't need rails." "I don't want to go anywhere," said Thomas huffily. "I like my rails, thank you." Thomas often saw Terence working, but though he whistled, Terence never answered. Winter came, and with it dark heavy clouds full of snow. "I don't like it," said Thomas's driver. "A heavy fall is coming. I hope it doesn't stop us." "Pah!" said Thomas, seeing the snow melt on the rails. "Soft stuff, nothing to it." And he puffed on, feeling cold but confident. They finished their journey safely, but the country was covered, and the rails were two dark lines standing out in the white snow. "You'll need your snowplough for the next journey, Thomas," said his driver. "Pah! Snow is silly soft stuff. It won't stop me." "Listen to me," his driver replied. "We are going to fix your snowplough on, and I want no nonsense, please." The snowplough was heavy and uncomfortable, and made Thomas cross. He shook it, and he banged it, and when they got back it was so damaged that the driver had to take it off. "You're a very naughty engine," said his driver, as he shut the shed door that night. Next morning both driver and fireman came early, and worked hard to mend the snowplough, but they couldn't make it fit properly. It was time for the first train. Thomas was pleased. "I shan't have to wear it, I shan't have to wear it," he puffed to Annie and Clarabel. "I hope it's all right, I hope it's all right," they whispered anxiously to each other. The driver was anxious too. "It's not bad here," he said to the fireman, "but it's sure to be deep in the valley." It was snowing again when Thomas started, but the rails were not covered. Silly soft stuff, he puffed. "I didn't need that stupid old thing yesterday, and I shan't today. Snow can't stop me," and he rushed into the tunnel, thinking how clever he was. At the other end he saw a heap of snow fallen from the sides of the cutting. "Silly old snow," said Thomas, and charged it. "Cinders and ashes," said Thomas. "I'm stuck." And he was. "Back, Thomas, back," said his driver. Thomas tried, but his wheels spun and he couldn't move. More snow fell and piled up round him. The guard went back for help, while the driver, fireman and passengers tried to dig the snow away. But as fast as they dug, more snow slipped down until Thomas was nearly buried. "Oh, my wheels and coupling rods," said Thomas sadly. "I shall have to stop here till I'm frozen. What a silly engine I am." And Thomas began to cry. At last a tooting in the distance told them a bus had come for the passengers. Then Terence chugged through the tunnel. He pulled the empty coaches away and came back for Thomas. Thomas's wheels were clear, but still spun hopelessly when he tried to move. Terence tugged and slipped and tugged, and at last dragged Thomas into the tunnel. "Thank you, Terence. Your caterpillars are splendid," said Thomas gratefully. "I hope you'll be sensible now, Thomas," said his driver severely. "I'll try," said Thomas, as he puffed home. Troublesome Engines, Tenders and Turntables. The big stations at both ends of the line each have a turntable. The Fat Controller had them made so that Edward, Henry, Gordon and James can be turned round. It is dangerous for tender engines to go fast backwards. Tank engines like Thomas don't need turntables. They can go just as well backwards as forwards. But if you heard Gordon talking a short while ago, you'd have thought that the Fat Controller had given him a tender just to show how important he was. "You don't understand, little Thomas," said Gordon. "We tender engines have a position to keep up. You haven't a tender, and that makes a difference. It doesn't matter where you go, but we are important, and for the Fat Controller to make us shunt trucks, fetch coaches, and go on some of those dirty sidings, it's not the proper thing." And Gordon puffed away in a dignified manner. Thomas chuckled and went off with Annie and Clarabel. Arrived at the terminus, Gordon waited till all the passengers had got out. Then, groaning and grumbling, he shunted the coaches to another platform. "Disgraceful! Disgraceful!" he hissed as he ran backwards to the turntable. The turntable was in a windy place close to the sea. It was only just big enough for Gordon, and if he was not on it just right, he put it out of balance and made it difficult to turn. Today Gordon was in a bad temper, and the wind was blowing fiercely. His driver tried to make him stop in the right place. Backwards and forwards they went, but Gordon wasn't trying. At last Gordon's driver gave it up. The fireman tried to turn the handle, but Gordon's weight and the strong wind prevented him. The driver, some plate layers, and the fireman all tried together. "It's no good," they said at last, mopping their faces. "Your tender upsets the balance. If you were a nice tank engine you'd be all right. Now you'll have to pull the next train backwards." Gordon came to the platform. Some little boys shouted, "Come on, quick! Here's a new tank engine!" "What a swizz!" they said when they came near. "It's only Gordon back to front." Gordon hissed emotionally. He puffed to the junction. "Hello," called Thomas. "Playing tank engines? Sensible engine. Take my advice, scrap your tender and have a nice bunker instead." Gordon snorted but didn't answer. Even James laughed when he saw him. "Take care," hissed Gordon. "You might stick too." "No fear," chuckled James. "I'm not so fat as you." "I mustn't stick," thought James anxiously, as he ran to the turntable later. He stopped on just the right place to balance the table. It could now swing easily. His fireman turned the handle. James turned, much too easily. The wind puffed him round like a top. He couldn't stop. At last the wind died down, and James stopped turning, but not before Gordon, who had been turned on the loop line, had seen him. "Well, well," he said, "are you playing roundabouts?" Poor James, feeling quite giddy, rolled off to the shed without a word. That night the three engines had an indignation meeting. "It's shameful to treat tender engines like this. Henry gets hushed by elephants, Gordon has to go backwards and people think he's a tank engine, James spins round like a top and everyone laughs at us, and added to that, the fat controller makes us shunt in dirty sidings. Yuck!" "Listen," said Gordon. He whispered something to the others. "We'll do it tomorrow. The fat controller will look silly." Henry the green engine. Percy and the trousers. On cold mornings Percy often saw workmen wearing scarves. "My funnel's cold, my funnel's cold," he would puff. "I want a scarf, I want a scarf." "Rubbish, Percy," said Henry one day. "Engines don't wear scarves." "Engines with proper funnels do," said Percy in his cheeky way. "You've only got a small one." Henry snorted. He was proud of his short, neat funnel. Just then a train came in, and Percy, still puffing, "I want a scarf, I want a scarf," went to take the coaches to their siding. His driver always shut off steam just outside the station, and Percy would try to surprise the coaches by coming in as quietly as he could. Two porters were taking some luggage across the line. They had a big load and were walking backwards to see that none fell off the trolley. Percy arrived so quietly that the porters didn't hear him till the trolley was on the line. The porters jumped clear. The trolley disappeared with a crunch. Boxes and bags burst in all directions. "Oh!" groaned Percy and stopped. Sticky streams of red and yellow jam trickled down his face. A top hat hung on his lamp iron. Clothes, hats, boots, shoes, skirts and blouses stuck to his front. A pair of striped trousers coiled lovingly around his funnel. They were grey no longer. Angry passengers looked at their broken trunks. The fat controller seized the top hat. "Mine," he said crossly. "Percy," he shouted, "look at this." "Yes, sir, I am, sir," a muffled voice replied. "My best trousers too." "Yes, sir, please, sir," said Percy nervously. "I am very cross," said the fat controller. "We must pay the passengers for their spoilt clothes. My hat is dented and my trousers are ruined, all because you will come into the station as if you were playing Grandma's footsteps with the coaches." The driver unwound the trousers. The fat controller waved them away. "Percy wanted a scarf. He shall have my trousers for a scarf. They will keep him warm." Percy wore them back to the yard. He doesn't like scarves now. Henry's sneeze. One lovely Saturday morning, Henry was puffing along. The sun shone, the fields were green, the birds sang. Henry had plenty of steam in his boiler and he was feeling happy. I feel so well, he sang. Trickety-trot, hummed his coaches. Henry saw some boys on a bridge. Peep, peep, hello, he whistled cheerfully. Peep, peep, he called the next moment. Oh, for the boys didn't wave and take his number. They dropped stones on him instead. They were silly, stupid boys who thought it would be fun to drop stones down his funnel. Some of the stones hit Henry's boiler and spoilt his paint. One hit the fireman on the head as he was shoveling coal, and others broke the carriage windows. It's a shame, hissed Henry. They've broken our glass, sobbed the coaches. The driver opened the first aid box, bandaged the fireman's head, and planned what he was going to do. They stopped the train and the guard asked if any passengers were hurt. No one was hurt, but everyone was cross. They saw the fireman's bumped head and told him what to do for it, and they looked at Henry's paint. Call the police, they shouted angrily. No, said the driver, leave it to Henry and me. We'll teach those lads a lesson. What will you do, they asked. Can you keep a secret? Yes, they all said. Well then, said the driver, Henry is going to sneeze at them. What? Cried all the passengers. The driver laughed. Henry draws air in through his fire and puffs it out with smoke and steam. When he puffs hard, the air blows ashes from his fire into his smoke box, and these ashes sometimes prevent him puffing properly. When your nose is blocked, you sometimes sneeze. If Henry's smoke box is blocked, I can make air and steam blow the ashes out through his funnel. We will do it at the bridge and startle those boys. Henry puffed on to the terminus where he had a rest. Then he took the train back. Lots of people were waiting at the station just before the bridge. They wanted to see what would happen. Henry has plenty of ashes, said the driver. Please keep all windows shut till we have passed the bridge. Henry is excited as we are, aren't you, old fellow? And he patted Henry's boiler. Henry didn't answer. He was feeling stuffed up, but he winked at his driver. The guard's flag waved, his whistle blew, and they were off. Soon in the distance they saw the bridge. They were the boys there, and they all had stones. Are you ready, Henry? Said his driver. Sneeze hard when I tell you. Now, he said, and turned the handle. Shoo! Smoke and steam and ashes spouted from his funnel. They went all over the bridge and all over the boys, who ran away as black as soot. Well done, Henry, laughed his driver. They won't drop stones on engines again. Your coat is all black, but we'll rub you down and paint your scratches and you'll be as good as new tomorrow. Henry has never sneezed again under a bridge. The Fat Controller doesn't like it. His smoke box is always cleaned in the yard while he is resting. He has now gone under more bridges than he can count. But from that day to this, there have been no more boys with stones. Toby the Tram Engine. Mrs. Kindly's Christmas. It was nearly Christmas. Annie and Clarabel were packed full of people and parcels. Thomas was having very hard work. Come on, he puffed. We're feeling so full, grumbled the coaches. Thomas looked at the hill ahead. Can I do it? He puffed anxiously. Suddenly he saw a handkerchief waving from a cottage window. He felt better at once. Yes, I can, he puffed bravely. He pulled his hardest and was soon through the tunnel and resting in the station. That was Mrs. Kindly who waved to you, Thomas, his driver told him. She has to stay in bed all day. Poor lady, said Thomas. I am sorry for her. Engines have heavy loads at Christmas time, but Thomas and Toby didn't mind the hard work when they saw Mrs. Kindly waving. But then it began to rain. It rained for days and days. Thomas didn't like it, nor did his driver. Off we go, Thomas, he would say. Pull hard and get home quickly. Mrs. Kindly won't wave today. But whether she waved or not, they always whistled when they passed the lovely little cottage. Its white walls stood out against the dark background of the hills. Hello, exclaimed Thomas's fireman one day. Look at that! The driver came across the cab. Something's wrong there, he said. Hanging flapping and bedraggled from a window of the cottage was something that looked like a large red flag. Mrs. Kindly needs help, I expect, said the driver, and put on the brakes. Thomas gently stopped. The guard came squelching through the rain up to Thomas's cab, and the driver pointed to the flag. See if a doctor's on the train and ask him to go to the cottage, then walk back to the station and tell him we've stopped. The fireman went to see if the line was clear in front. 2 passengers left the train and climbed to the cottage. Then the fireman returned. "We'll back down to the station," said the driver, "so that Thomas can get a good start." "We shan't get up the hill," the fireman answered. "Come and see what's happened." They walked along the line round the bend. "Jiminy Christmas!" exclaimed the driver. "Go back to the train. I'm going to the cottage." He found the doctor with Mrs. Kindly. "Silly of me to faint," she said. "You saw the red dressing gown? You're all safe?" asked Mrs. Kindly. "Yes," smiled the driver. "I've come to thank you. There was a landslide in the cutting, doctor, and Mrs. Kindly saw it from her window and stopped us. She saved our lives." "God bless you, ma'am," said the driver, and tiptoed from the room. They cleared the line by Christmas Day, and the sun shone as a special train puffed up from the junction. First came Toby, then Thomas and Annie and Clarabel, and last of all, but very pleased at being allowed to come, was Henrietta. The Fat Controller was there, and lots of other people who wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Kindly. "Peep, peep, Happy Christmas!" whistled the engines as they reached the place. The people got out and climbed to the cottage. Thomas and Toby wished they could go too. Mrs. Kindly's husband met them at the door. The Fat Controller, Thomas's driver, fireman and guard went upstairs, while the others stood in the sunshine below the window. The driver gave her a new dressing gown to replace the one spoiled by the rain. The guard bought her some grapes, and the fireman gave her some woolly slippers and promised to bring some coal as a present from Thomas next time that they were passing. Mrs. Kindly was very pleased with all her presents. "Oh, you are very good to me," she said. "The passengers and I," said the Fat Controller, "hope you will accept these tickets for the South Coast, Mrs. Kindly, and get really well in the sunshine. We cannot thank you enough for preventing that accident. I hope we have not tired you out. Goodbye and a happy Christmas." Then going quietly downstairs, they joined the group outside the window and sang some carols before returning to the train. Mrs. Kindly is now at Bournemouth, getting better every day, and Thomas and Toby are looking forward to the time when they can welcome her home. Gordon the Big Engine. Leaves. 2 men were cleaning Gordon. "Mind my eyes," Gordon grumbled. "Oh, shut it, silly. Did ever you see so much mud, Bert? No, I never, Alf. You ought to be ashamed, Gordon, giving us extra work." The hosing and scrubbing stopped. Gordon opened one eye, but shut it quickly. "Wake up, Gordon," said the Fat Controller sternly, "and listen to me. You will pull no more coaches till you are a really useful engine." So Gordon had to spend his time pulling trucks. Goods trains, he muttered. He felt his position deeply. "That's for you, and you, and you," Gordon said crossly. "Oh, oh, oh, oh," screamed the trucks as he shunted them about the yard. "Trucks will be trucks," said James, watching him. "They won't with me," snorted Gordon. "I'll teach them. Go on!" And another truck scurried away. "They tried to push me down the hill this morning," Gordon explained. "It's slippery there. You'll probably need some help." "I don't need help on hills," said James huffily. Gordon laughed and got ready for his next train. James went away to take the express. "Slippery hills indeed," he snorted. "I don't need help." Come on, he puffed. All in good time, grumbled the coachers. The train was soon running nicely, but a distant signal checked them close to Gordon's Hill. Gordon's Hill used to be bleak and bare. Strong winds from the sea had made it hard to climb. Trees were planted to give shelter, and in summer the trains run through a leafy avenue. Now autumn had come and dead leaves fell. The wind usually puffed them away, but today rain made them heavy, and they did not move. The home signal showed clear, and James began to go faster. He started to climb the hill. I'll do it, he puffed confidently. Halfway up, he was not so sure. I must do it, he panted desperately. But try as he would, his wheels slipped on the leaves, and he couldn't pull the train at all. What's the matter, he gasped. Steady, old boy, steady, soothed his driver. His fireman put sand on the rails to help him grip, but James's wheels spun so fast that they only ground the sand and leaves to slippery mud, making things worse than before. The train slowly stopped, then "Help, help, help," whistled James, for though his wheels were turning forwards, the heavy coaches pulled him backwards, and the whole train started slipping down the hill. His driver shut off steam, carefully put on the brakes, and skillfully stopped the train. "Whew!" He sat down and mopped his face. I've never known that happen before. I have, said the fireman, in Binkham Tunnel's southern region. The guard poked his head in the cab. Now what? He asked. Back to the station, said the fireman, taking charge, and send for a banker. So the guard warned the signalman and they brought the train safely down. But Gordon, who had followed with a goods train, saw what had happened. Gordon left his trucks and crossed over to James. I thought you could climb hills, he chuckled. James didn't answer. He had no steam left. Ah, well, we live and learn, said Gordon. We live and learn. Never mind, little James, he went on kindly. I'm going to push behind. Whistle when you're ready. James waited till he had plenty of steam, then beep, beep, he called. Pop, pop. Pull hard, puffed Gordon. We'll do it, puffed James. Pull hard, we'll do it. The engines puffed together. Clouds of smoke and steam towered from the snorting engines as they struggled up the hill. We can do it, puffed James. We will do it, puffed Gordon. The greasy rails sometimes made Gordon's wheels slip, but he never gave up, and presently they reached the top. We've done it, they puffed. Gordon stopped. Boop, boop, he whistled. Goodbye. Peep, peep, thank you, goodbye, answered James. Gordon watched the coaches wistfully till they were out of sight. Then slowly he trundled back to his waiting trucks. Edward the Blue Engine, Old Iron. One day James had to wait at Edward's station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross. Late again, he shouted. Edward only laughed, and James fumed away. Edward is impossible, he grumbled to the others. He clanks about like a lot of old iron, and he's so slow he makes us wait. Thomas and Percy were indignant. Old iron, they snorted. Slow? Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day. Really, said James huffily, I should like to see him do it. One day James's driver did not feel well when he came to work. I'll manage, he said, but when they reached the top of Gordon's Hill, he could hardly stand up. The fireman drove the train to the next station. He spoke to the signalman, put the trucks in a siding, and uncoupled James ready for shunting. Then he helped the driver over to the station and asked them to look after him and find a relief. Suddenly the signalman shouted, and the fireman turned round and saw James puffing away. He ran hard, but he couldn't catch James, and soon came back to the signal box. The signalman was busy. All traffic halted, he announced at last. Up and down main lines are clear for 30 miles, and the inspector's coming. The fireman mopped his face. What happened? He asked. 2 boys were on the footplate. They tumbled off when James started. I shouted at them and they ran like rabbits. Just let me catch them, said the fireman grimly. I'll teach them to meddle with my engine. Both men jumped as the telephone rang. Yes, answered the signalman. He's here. Right. I'll tell him. The inspector's coming at once in Edward. He wants a shunter's pole and a coil of wire rope. What for? Wondered the fireman. Search me, but you'd better get them quickly. The fireman was ready and waiting when Edward arrived. The inspector saw the pole and rope. Good man, he said, jump in. We'll catch him, puffed Edward, crossing to the upline in pursuit. James was laughing as he left the yard. What a lark, he chuckled to himself. Presently he missed his driver's hand on the regulator, and then he realised there was no one in his cab. What shall I do? He wailed. I can't stop. Help, help. We're coming. Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. With a great effort, he caught up and crept alongside, slowly gaining till his smoke box was level with James's buffer beam. Steady, Edward. The inspector stood on Edward's front, and holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole, he was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engine swayed and lurched. He tried again and again. More than once he nearly fell, but just saved himself. At last! Got him! He shouted. He pulled the noose tight and came back to the cab safely. Gently braking so as not to snap the rope, Edward's driver checked the engine's speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. The engines puffed back side by side. So the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward. I'm sorry, whispered James. Thank you for saving me. That's all right. You were splendid, Edward. The Fat Controller was waiting, and thanked the men warmly. A fine piece of work, he said. James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your warm parch mended." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Edward happily. "It'll be lovely not to clank." The two naughty boys were soon caught by the police, and their fathers walloped them soundly. They were also forbidden to watch trains till they could be trusted. James's driver soon got well in hospital, and is now back at work. James missed him very much, but he missed Edward more. And you'll be glad to know that when Edward came home the other day, James and all the other engines gave him a tremendous welcome. The Fat Controller thinks he will be deaf for weeks. 4 little engines. Sir Handel. The new engines looked very smart. One was called Sir Handel, and the other Peter Sam. "What a small shed," grumbled Sir Handel. "This won't do at all." "I think it's nice," said Peter Sam. "Huh," grunted Sir Handel. "What's that rubbish?" "Shh," said Peter Sam. "That's Skarloey, the famous old engine." "I'm sorry, Skarloey," he whispered. "Sir Handel's upset now, but he's quite nice, really." Skarloey felt sorry for Peter Sam. "Now, Sir Handel," said the fireman next morning, "we're going to get you ready for work." "I'm tired," he yawned. "Let Peter Sam go. He'd love it." "No," said the fireman. "Orders are orders. You're first." "Oh, well," said Sir Handel sulkily, "I suppose I must." When his driver arrived, Sir Handel puffed away to fetch the coaches. "Whatever next?" he snorted. "Those aren't coaches, they're cattle trucks." "Ooh!" screamed Agnes, Ruth, Lucy, Jemima, and Beatrice. "What a horrid engine!" "It's not what I'm used to," clanked Sir Handel rebelliously, making for the station. He rolled to the platform just as Gordon arrived. "Hullo," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm Gordon. Who are you?" "I'm Sir Handel. Yes, I've heard of you. You're an express engine, I believe." "So am I, but I'm used to smart coaches, not these cattle trucks." "Do you have smart coaches?" "Oh, yes, I see you do. We must have a chat sometime. Sorry, I can't stop. We must keep time, you know." And he puffed, leaving Gordon at a loss for words. Come along, he puffed. Cattle trucks, grumbled the coaches. We'll pay him out. Presently they stopped at a station. The line curved here and began to climb. It was not very steep, but the day was misty, and the rails were slippery. "Hold back," whispered Agnes to Ruth. "Hold back," whispered Ruth to Jemima. "Hold back," whispered Jemima to Lucy. "Hold back," whispered Lucy to Beatrice, and they giggled as Sir Handel started and their couplings tightened. Come on, he puffed, as his wheels slipped on the greasy rails. Come on. His wheels were spinning, but the coaches pulled him back, and the train stopped on the hill beyond the station. I can't do it, he grumbled. "I'm used to sensible smart coaches, not these bumpy cattle trucks." The guard gave up. "I think the coaches are up to something," he told the driver. So they decided to bring the train down again to a level piece of line, to give Sir Handel a good start. The guard helped the fireman put sand on the rails, and Sir Handel made a tremendous effort. The coaches tried hard to drag him back, but he puffed and pulled so hard that they were soon over the top and away on their journey. The Thing Controller was severe with Sir Handel that night. "You are a troublesome engine," he said. "You are rude, conceited, and much too big for your wheels. Next time I shall punish you severely." Sir Handel was impressed, and behaved well for several days. Then one morning he took the train to the top station. He was cross. It was Peter Sam's turn, but the Fit Controller had made him go instead. "We'll leave the coaches," said his driver, "and fetch some trucks from the quarry." "Trucks!" snorted Sir Handel. "Trucks!" "Yes," his driver repeated. "Trucks!" Sir Handel jerked forward. "I won't," he muttered. "So there." He lurched, bumped, and stopped. His driver and fireman got out. "Told you," said Sir Handel triumphantly. He had pushed the rails apart and settled down between them. They telephoned the Thing Controller. He came up at once with Peter Sam and brought some workmen in a truck. Then he and the fireman took Peter Sam home with the coaches, while the driver and the workmen put Sir Handel back on the rails. Sir Handel did not feel so pleased with himself when he crawled home, and found the Thing Controller waiting for him. "You are a very naughty engine," he said sternly. "You will stay in the shed till I can trust you to behave." Percy the Small Engine. Percy and Harold. Percy had worked hard at the harbour. Toby helped, but sometimes the loads of stone were too heavy, and Percy had to fetch them for himself. Then he would push the trucks along the quay to where the workmen needed the stone for their building. An airfield was close by, and Percy heard the aeroplanes zooming overhead all day. The noisiest of all was a helicopter, which hovered buzzing like an angry bee. "Stupid thing," said Percy. "Why can't it go and buzz somewhere else?" One day Percy stopped near the airfield. The helicopter was standing quite close. "Hello," said Percy. "Who are you?" "I'm Harold. Who are you?" "I'm Percy. What whirly great arms you've got!" "They're nice arms," said Harold, offended. "I can hover like a bird. Don't you wish you could hover?" "Certainly not. I like my rails, thank you." "I think railways are slow," said Harold in a bored voice. "They're not much use and quite out of date." He whirled his arms and buzzed away. Percy found Toby at the top station arranging trucks. "I say, Toby," he burst out, "that Harold, that stuck-up whirlybird thing, thinks I'm slow and out of date. Just let him wait. I'll show him." He collected his trucks and started off, still fuming. Soon above the clatter of the trucks they heard a familiar buzzing. "Percy," whispered his driver, "there's Harold. He's not far ahead. Let's race him." "Yes, let's," said Percy excitedly, and quickly gathering speed he shot off down the line. The guard's wife had given him a flask of tea for elevenses. He had just poured out a cup when the van lurched and he spilt it down his uniform. He wiped up the mess with his handkerchief and staggered to the front platform. Percy was pounding along, the truck screamed and swayed, while the van rolled and pitched like a ship at sea. "Well, I'll be a ding-dong-danged," said the guard. Then he saw Harold buzzing alongside and understood. "Go it, Percy," he yelled. "You're gaining." Percy had never been allowed to run fast before. He was having the time of his life. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he panted to the trucks. We don't want to, they grumbled. But it was no use. Percy was bucketing along with flying wheels, and Harold was high and alongside. The fireman shovelled for dear life, while the driver was so excited he could hardly keep still. "Well done, Percy," he shouted. "We're gaining. We're going ahead. Oh, good boy, good boy." Far ahead, a distant signal warned them that the harbour wharf was near. Shut off steam, Percy whistled, "Peep, peep, peep, brakes, guard, please." Using Percy's brakes too, the driver carefully checked the train's headlong speed. They rolled under the main line, and halted smoothly on the wharf. "Oh dear," groaned Percy, "I'm sure we've lost." The fireman scrambled to the cab roof. We've won, he shouted, and nearly fell off in his excitement. Harold's still hovering. He's looking for a place to land. "Listen, boys," the fireman called. "Here's a song for Percy," said Harold. "Helicopter to our Percy, you are slow. Your railway is out of date and not much use, you know. But Percy with his stone trucks did the trip in record time, and we beat that helicopter on our old branch line." The driver and guard soon caught the tune, and so did the workmen on the quay. Percy loved it. "Oh, thank you," he said. He liked the last line best of all. The 8 famous engines. Double header. The Fat Controller gave Gordon a rest when he came back from London. He told James to do his work. James got very conceited about it. "You know, little Toby," he said one day, "I'm an important engine now. Everybody knows it. They come in crowds to see me flash by. The heaviest train makes no difference. I'm as regular as clockwork. They all set their watches by me. Never late, always on time. That's me." "Says you," replied Toby cheekily. Toby was out on the main line. The Fat Controller had sent him to the works. His parts were worn. They clanked as he trundled along. He was enjoying his journey. He was a little engine, and his tanks didn't hold much water, so he often had to stop for a drink. He had small wheels too, and he couldn't go as fast. "Never mind," he thought, "the signalmen all know me. They'll give me plenty of time." But a new signalman had come to one of the stations. Toby had wanted to take Henrietta, but the Fat Controller had said, "No. What would the passengers do without you?" He wondered if Henrietta was lonely. Percy had promised to look after her, but Toby couldn't help worrying. "Percy doesn't understand her like I do," he said. He felt thirsty and tired. He had come a long way. He saw a distant signal. "Good," he thought, "now I can have a nice drink and rest in a siding till James has gone by." Toby's driver thought so too. They stopped by the water crane. His fireman jumped out and put the hose in his tank. Toby was enjoying his drink when the signalman came up. Toby had never seen him before. "No time for that," said the signalman. "We must clear the road for the express." "Right," said the driver. "We'll wait in the siding." "No good," said the signalman. "It's full of trucks. You'll have to hurry to the next station. They've got plenty of room for you there." Poor Toby clanked sadly away. "I must hurry, I must hurry," he panted. But hurrying used a lot of water, and his tanks were soon empty. They damped down his fire and struggled on, but he soon ran out of steam and stood marooned on the main line far away from the next station. The fireman walked back. He put detonators on the line to warn James and his driver. Then he hurried along the sleepers. "I'll tell the signalman something," he said grimly. James was fuming when Toby's fireman arrived and explained what had happened. "My fault," said the signalman. "I didn't understand about Toby." "Now, James," said his driver, "you'll have to push him." "What, me?" snorted James. "Me? Push Toby and pull my train?" "Yes, you." "Shan't." The driver, the fireman, the passengers, and the guard all said he was a bad engine. All right, grumbled James. He came up behind Toby and gave him a bump. "Get on, you," he said crossly. James's driver made him push Toby all the way to the works. "It serves you right for being cross," he said. James had to work very hard when he reached the workstation. He felt exhausted. Some little boys ran along the platform. "Wow," said one, "the express is late. A double header too. Do you know what I think? I think," he went on, "that James couldn't pull the train, so Toby had to help him." "Caw!" said James, and disappeared in a cloud of steam. Duck and the diesel engine. Dirty work. When Duck returned and heard the trucks singing, he was horrified. "Shut up," he ordered, and bumped them hard. "I'm sorry our trucks were rude to you, Diesel," he said. Diesel was still furious. "It's all your fault. You made them laugh at me," he complained. "Nonsense," said Henry. "Duck would never do that. We engines have our differences, but we never talk about them to the trucks. That would be disgraceful," said Gordon. "Disgusting," put in James. "Despicable," finished Henry. Diesel hated Duck. He wanted him to be sent away, so he made a plan. Next day he spoke to the trucks. "I see you like jokes," he said in his oily voice. "You made a good joke about me yesterday. I laughed and laughed. Duck told me one about Gordon. I'll whisper it." "Don't tell Gordon I told you." Andy sniggered away. "Oh, ho, ho, ho," guffawed the trucks. "Gordon will be cross when he knows. Let's tell him and pay Duck out for bumping us." Diesel went to all the sidings, and in each he told different stories. He said Duck had told them to him. This was untrue, but the trucks didn't know. They laughed rudely at the engines as they went by, and soon Gordon, Henry, and James found out why. "Disgraceful," said Gordon. "Disgusting," said James. "Despicable," said Henry. "We cannot allow it." They consulted together. "Yes," they said, "he did it to us. We'll do it to him and see how he likes it." Duck was tired out. The trucks had been cheeky and troublesome. He had had hard work to make them behave. He wanted a rest in the shed. "Whoosh! Keep out!" The three engines barred his way, and Diesel lurked behind. "Stop fooling," said Duck. "I'm tired." "So are we," hissed the engines. "We are tired of you. We like Diesel. We don't like you. You tell tales about us to the trucks." "I don't." "You do." "I don't." "You do." The Fat Controller came to stop the noise. "Duck called me a galloping sausage," spluttered Gordon. "Rusty red scrap iron," hissed James. "I'm old Square Wheels," fumed Henry. "Well, Duck?" Duck considered. "I only wish, sir," he said gravely, "that I'd thought of those names myself. If the dome fit—" "Ahem!" the Fat Controller coughed. "He made trucks laugh at us," accused the engines. The Fat Controller recovered. "Did you, Duck?" "Certainly not, sir. No steam engine would be as mean as that." "Now, Diesel, you heard what Duck said?" "I can't understand it, sir. To think that Duck of all engines—I'm dreadfully grieved, sir. But no, nothing." "I see. Diesel squirmed and hoped he didn't. "I am sorry, Duck," the Fat Controller went on, "but you must go to Edward Station for a while. I know who would be glad to see you." "Beg pardon, sir, do you mean now?" "Yes, please." "As you wish, sir." Duck trundled sadly away, while Diesel smirked with triumph in the darkness. The Little Old Engine. Little Old Twins. One day the owner brought some people to see the railway. He showed them everything. They travelled in the trains and looked at stations and bridges and coaches. "Yes," they would say thoughtfully, "we'll take this," or "No, we won't take that." They made notes in their books. Peter Sam whispered to Sir Handel, "Men came and did that on our old line." "And then," said Sir Handel, "soon afterwards it was sold," finished Peter Sam mournfully. Peter Sam didn't sing any more. He wanted to cry. The other engines were sad too. "What's the matter with you all?" his driver asked him one day. "You look like dying ducks." "We don't want to be sold," said Peter Sam miserably. "Sold?" The driver was surprised. "Who to?" "To those people who came and talked about taking things." "You silly little engine," laughed his driver. "They're not going to buy us. They're going to take our pictures on television." And he tried to explain what that meant. "Not going to be sold, not going to be sold," sang Peter Sam. He could hardly wait to tell the others. He told them about the television as well, and they were pleased and excited too, all except Sir Handel. "I don't hold with it," he grumbled. "Vulgar, I call it. Fancy traipsing, making an exposition of yourself. I won't do it, I tell you. Telly something indeed. Just let the thing control you." "I'll tell him something." Skarloey said nothing. He just winked at Peter Sam. But next day, when the Thing Controller did come to explain about the television, Sir Handel kept strangely quiet. "Now," said the Thing Controller at last, "I want every engine to take part." I don't feel well," quavered Sir Handel. "You poor engine," said the Thing Controller gravely. "You can stay in the shed." Sir Handel smiled broadly. "And your driver and fireman shall take you to pieces. That will make a very interesting picture. Just what we need." Sir Handel's feelings were beyond words. "That's that," said the Thing Controller. "Now, Skarloey, will you take Agnes, Ruth, Lucy, Jemima and Beatrice?" "Oh yes, please, sir. I was hoping you would let me have them." "Duncan shall have a goods train, while Rusty with Mr. Hugh and the men can show how we mend the line." "Please, sir, what about me, sir?" asked Peter Sam anxiously. The Thing Controller smiled. "You, Peter Sam, shall pull the special television train." "Oh, sir," bubbled Peter Sam in ecstasy. The television men built towers for cameras beside the line. They put cameras on Ada too, and filled Gertrude with wires and instruments. Some trucks coupled behind carried aerials and generators. Everyone practiced hard till they knew just what they had to do. At last the time came, and the announcer gave the signal. "We're on the air, we're on the air," puffed Peter Sam, and he rolled the heavy train to the shops where Sir Handel was being mended. Sir Handel did not enjoy their visit. "We're on the air, we're on the air," chanted Peter Sam. He trundled over the bridge near the middle station. "Beep, beep," he whistled to Duncan. "We're coming." The announcer talked to Duncan, and they puffed over the second bridge to the quarry siding, where Rusty, Mr. Hugh and the men were waiting to explain about their work. Soon they had to go. Peter Sam whistled. Rusty tooted in reply, and they clattered through the tunnel, rumbled over the viaduct near the waterfall, and rolled at last into the top station. The owner climbed down. "We arranged for television," he said, "to let everyone see our little old engine. We are proud of him. 95 years old and good as new. There's nothing like him anywhere. 3 cheers for Skarloey." "Beep, beep, beep," whistled Peter Sam, and everybody joined in. Skarloey smiled. "I'm very glad to be home again. Thank you, sir, and all for your nice surprise. Now I'll surprise you. Listen. When I was mended in England, I found my twin." The owner stared. "Is there really another engine like you?" "Yes, sir," chuckled Skarloey. "There is another engine came to be mended too, called Taliclin. When the workmen saw us together, they laughed and called us their little old twins. Taliclin told me about his railway. It is a lovely one at Tawyn in Wales. Well, sir, they mended us both and sent us home." but I often think of Taliclin. He's 95 years old too, just like me. Please go to see him, all of you, and wish him dry rails and good running from Skarloey, his little old twin. The twin engines, the missing coach. Soon workmen came to give the twins their numbers. Donald was 9 and Douglas 10. When the men went away, they were left alone in the shed. You may have noticed, Dougie, that young Penters forgot about something. What did they forget? They painted brand new numbers on our tenders, but they put names on us. Donald winked broadly at his twin. Ya mean, grinned Douglas, that we can... Just that, chuckled Donald. Hold your wish, here's the inspector. Now 9 and 10, smiled the inspector. Here's Duck, he'll show you round before you start work. The twins enjoyed themselves, and were soon friends with Duck. They didn't mind what they did, they tackled goods trains and coaches easily. For once the twins had shunted them, trucks knew better than to try any tricks. We like it fine here, said Donald. That's good, smiled Duck, but take my tip, watch out for Gordon, Henry and James, they're sure to try some nonsense. Dinna fesh yourself, chuckled Douglas, we'll soon settle them. Donald and Douglas had deep-toned whistles. They sound like buses, said Gordon. Or ships, sniggered Henry. Tugboats, Annie, laughed Gordon. Ha ha ha. Donald and Douglas cruised quietly up, one on each side. You wouldn't be making fun of us, would you, no? Asked Donald. Gordon and Henry jumped. They glanced nervously from side to side. No, said Gordon. No, certainly not, said Henry. That's fine, said Douglas. Now just mind the berth for you, and keep it that way. That was the way Gordon and Henry kept it. Every day, punctually at 3:30, Gordon steams in with the express. It is called the Wild North Western, and is full of people from England, Wales and Scotland. There is also a special coach for passengers travelling to places on Thomas's branch line. When the other coaches are taken away empty, engines have to remember to shunt the special coach to the Blakely platform. It does not wait there long. Thomas, with Annie and Clarabel, come hurrying from the junction to fetch it. Thomas is very proud of his special coach. One afternoon, Douglas helped Duck in the yard while Donald waited to take a goods train to the other end of the line. As Duck was busy arranging Donald's trucks, Douglas offered to take away Gordon's coaches. Douglas was enjoying himself when an awful thought struck him. I hope the fat controller doesn't find out I shouldn't be here. I couldn't abide going back. He worried so much over this that he forgot about Thomas's special coach. He pushed it with the others into the carriage siding, then ambled along to join Donald at the water column. As he went, Thomas scampered by, whistling cheerfully. Soon Thomas came fussing. Where's my coach? Coach? Asked Donald. What coach? My special coach that Gordon brings for me. It's gone. I must find it. He bustled away. Losh sakes, said Douglas. I mun have stowed away the special coach with the others. D'ye see that? Exclaimed Donald's driver. A mob of angry passengers erupted from the siding. They're complaining to the fat controller. He'll be coming here next. No, listen, said Douglas's driver. We'll change tenders. Then away with you, Donald, and thank young goods. Dinna fish about us. Quick no, do as I say. The fat controller and 3 passengers walked towards them, but Donald, with Douglas's tender, 10, was out and away with the goods before they came near. Douglas and his driver waited with innocent expressions. Ah, said the fat controller, number 9, why have you not taken the goods? My tender is away, sir. The driver showed him the tender, still uncoupled. She's some defect, no doubt. Tell me, why did number 10 leave so quickly? Maybe, sir, put in Douglas, he saw you coming and thought he was late. Said the fat controller. He turned to the passengers. Here, gentlemen, are the facts. Number 10 has been shunting the yard. Your coach disappeared. We investigate. Number 10, disappears too. You can draw your conclusions. Please accept my apologies. The matter will be investigated. Good afternoon, gentlemen. The fat controller watched them till they climbed the station ramp. His shoulders twitched. He wiped his eyes. Douglas wondered if he was crying. He was not. He swung round suddenly. Douglas, he rapped, why are you masquerading with Donald's tender? Branch line engines. Percy's predicament. Toby brought Henrietta to the top station. Percy was grumpily shunting. Hello, Percy, he said. I see Daisy's left the milk again. I'll have to make a special journey with it, I suppose, grumbled Percy. Anyone would think I'd nothing to do. Toby pondered the problem. Tell you what, he said at last, I'll take the milk, you fetch my trucks. Their drivers and the station master agreed, and both engines set off. They thought it would be a nice change. Percy trundled away to the quarry. He had never been there before. It's steep, he thought, but I can manage. Trucks don't dare to play tricks on me now. He marshalled them on in a lordly way. Hurry along there, he said, and bumped them if they dallied. The trucks were annoyed. This is Toby's place, they grumbled. Percy's got no right to poke his funnel up here and push us around. They whispered and passed the word. Pay Percy out. At last they were all arranged. Come along, puffed Percy sharply. No nonsense. We'll give him nonsense, giggled the trucks. But they followed so quietly that Percy thought they were completely under control. They rumbled along the twisty line till they saw the notice saying, All trains stop to pin down brakes. Peep, 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 whistled Percy. Brakes guard, please. But before he could check them, the trucks surged forward. On, they cried. Percy, taken by surprise, could not stop them, and in a moment they were careering down the hill. Help, help, whistled Percy. The man on duty at the street crossing rushed to warn traffic with his red flag, but was too late to switch Percy to the runaway siding. A slow-moving cockerel lost his tail feathers as Percy thundered across, but Percy couldn't bother with him. He had other things to worry about. Frantically trying to grip the rails, he slid past the engine shed into the yard. Beep, beep, look out, he whistled. His driver and fireman jumped clear. Percy shut his eyes and waited for the end. At the end of the yard there are sheds where workmen shape rough stone brought from the quarry. They then load it into trucks which are pulled to another siding out of the way. A train of these stood here when Percy came slithering down. The guard had left his van. He was talking to the station master. They heard frantic whistling and a splintering crash. They rushed from the office. The brake van was in smithereens. Percy, still whistling fit to burst, was perched on a couple of trucks, while his own trucks were piled up behind him. The Fat Controller arrived next day. Toby and Daisy had to help remove most of the wreckage, but Percy still stood on his perch. We must now try, said the Fat Controller crossly, to run the branch line with Toby and a diesel. You have put us in an awkward predicament. I'm sorry, sir. You can stay there, the Fat Controller went on, till we are ready. Perhaps it will teach you to be careful with trucks. Percy sighed. The trucks wobbled beneath his wheels. He quite understood about awkward predicaments. The Fat Controller spoke severely to Daisy too. My engines do not tell lies, he said. They work hard with no shirking. I send lazy engines away. Daisy was ashamed. However, he went on, Toby says you worked hard yesterday after Percy's accident, so you shall have another chance. Thank you, sir, said Daisy. I will work hard, sir. Toby says he'll help me. Excellent. What Toby doesn't know about branch line problems, the Fat Controller chuckled, such as bulls, isn't worth knowing. Toby's an experienced engine. Thomas came back next day, and Percy was sent to be mended. Annie and Clarabel were delighted to see Thomas again, and he took them for a run at once because they hadn't been out while he was away. Thomas, Toby and Daisy are now all friends. Daisy often takes the milk for Thomas, and when Toby is busy she takes Henrietta. Toby has taught Daisy a great deal. She shooed a cow off the line all by herself the other day. That shows you, doesn't it? Gallant Old Engine. Passengers and polish. Nancy is a guard's daughter. She was working on Skarloey with some polish and a rag. Wake up, lazy bones, she said severely. Your brass is filthy. Aren't you ashamed? No, said Skarloey sleepily. You're just an old fusspot. Go away. She tickled his nose. Rheneas comes home tomorrow. Don't you want to look nice? Skarloey woke suddenly. What? Tomorrow? Yes, Daddy told me. I'm going now. Nancy, stop. Do I really look nice? Please polish me again. There's a good kind girl. Now who's an old fusspot? Laughed Nancy. She gave him another rub and climbed down. Aren't you going to polish me? Asked Duncan. Sorry, not today. I'm helping the refreshment lady this afternoon. We must get the ices and things ready for the passengers on Skarloey's 2 o'clock train. Never mind, Duncan. I'll give you a good polish tomorrow. But Duncan did mind. It isn't fair, he complained. "Peter Sam gets a special funnel, Sir Handel gets special wheels, passengers get ices, and I'm not even polished." This, of course, wasn't true, but Duncan liked having a grievance. He began to sulk. That afternoon a message came from the station by the waterfall. "One of Skarloey's coaches has come off the rails. Please send some workmen to put it right." Duncan was in steam, so he had to go. "All this extra work," he grumbled. "It wears an engine out." "Rubbish," said his driver. "Come on." The derailed coach was in the middle of his train, so Skarloey had gone on to the top station with the front coaches. Duncan left the workmen and brought the passengers in the rear coaches home. He sulked all the way. He arrived back just in time for his own 4 o'clock train. "I get no rest, I get no rest," he complained. He was sulky and short of steam, so his driver waited a few minutes in the hope of raising more. But Duncan wouldn't try. "We can't keep the passengers waiting any longer," his driver said at last. "You always think about passengers," muttered Duncan, "and never about me. I'm never even polished. I'm overworked, and I won't stand it." He grumbled away, brooding over his wrongs. Duncan made heavy weather of the journey, but at last they reached the viaduct. "This is long, high, and narrow. No one can walk on it when a train is there." "Come on, Duncan," said his driver. "One more effort and you'll have a rest and a drink in the station." "Keep your old station," said Duncan rudely. "I'm staying here." And he did too. He stopped his train right on the viaduct, and nothing his driver or fireman could do would make him move another yard. Skarloey came from the top station to haul Duncan and his train to the platform. The passengers were very cross. They burst out of the train and told the drivers, the firemen, and the guard what a bad railway it was. Skarloey had to pull the train to the stop station. Duncan wouldn't even try. The Finn controller was waiting at the shed for Duncan that evening. He spoke to him severely, but Duncan still stayed sulky. He muttered to himself, "No polish, no passengers," in an obstinate sort of voice. He still has a lot to learn, doesn't he? Stepney the Bluebell engine. Stepney's special. So I tried very hard, but I couldn't work properly, and they put me on a siding. I stayed there for days and days. Other engines were there too. I was afraid. "I'd have been frightened too," said Edward. "But then some workmen came. They mended me and even gave me a coat of paint. I couldn't understand it till my driver came. He was very pleased. 'Stepney, you lucky old engine,' he said. 'You've been saved. The Bluebell Railway has bought you.'" "What a lovely surprise," smiled Edward. "Have they saved other engines besides you?" he asked. "Oh, yes," answered Stepney. "You'd like our Bluebell and Primrose? They're twins," he chuckled. "And as like as 2 peas, they only had numbers at first. Bluebell is 323 and Primrose is 27. They were very pleased when our controller gave them names. Some say he was wrong to do it. It certainly made them cocky, but they do work hard, and I think our controller was right. All engines ought to have names." "Yes," agreed Edward, "it's most important." "That's why," Stepney continued, "we're given names to our 488 and our 2650. But our controller doesn't know. It's a secret. Don't tell him, will you?" "Of course not," smiled Edward. "They are both very pleased about it, because now they feel part of the family. We call 488 Adams after his designer, you know. He's a lovely little engine. A southwestern from Devon. He can stroll away with any load he's given. Cromford, whose 2650 has been pulling trucks up high peaks in Derbyshire. He's tough in Cromford. He's had to be for that job. Captain Baxter's tough too," Stepney went on, "and rather rude, but he's worked in a quarry, and you know what that does to an engine's language and manners." "I do indeed," said Edward gravely. "He's a good sort really," said Stepney. "I like him. We both miss our work with trucks." He paused. "I oughtn't to say this," he went on, "after everyone's been so kind, but our line is very short, and I never get any good runs now. I miss them dreadfully." "Never mind," smiled Edward. "Perhaps you'll get some while you're here." Stepney said good-bye to Edward and then returned to the big station. There he helped Duck shunt the yard. They were soon great friends, and enjoyed their afternoon together. Thomas arrived before they'd finish, and stayed till it was time for his last branch line train. But that train's tail lamps were hardly out of sight when the 2 engines heard a commotion at the station. "Hello," said Duck, "I wonder what's up." Presently the night duty shunter came hurrying to the shed. The bell in the cabin on the branch line rang once, then 5, pause, 5. That means shunt to allow following train to pass. The signalman was puzzled. He telephoned control. A special, is it? I see. Thomas and his passengers grumbled at being delayed, but there was no help for it. Soon they heard an unfamiliar puffing. Express! Headlamps swayed and twinkled, then Stepney, pulling one coach, loomed in the station lights. He slowed to exchange tablets, whistled a greeting, then gathered speed into the night. Well, bust my boiler, said Thomas the Tank Engine. Shunted, fumed Thomas next morning, on my own branch too. It's a disgrace. I'm sorry, said Stepney. I was a special, he explained. Why? An important passenger came after you'd gone. He said he must get home and ordered a special. Duck kindly let me take it. We had a splendid run. No record breaking, of course, but... Ah, well, said Thomas modestly. Perhaps when you know the road as I do. Exactly, put in Stepney. You're such an expert, Thomas. Flattered, forgot he was cross, Thomas told Stepney all about his branch line. Mountain engines. Danger points. Donald brought Culdee up the valley to the exchange siding, where he was soon offloaded by crane. His driver and fireman and the manager were there. They all said goodbye and thank you to Donald. Then they lit Culdee's fire, and while waiting for the steam, they looked him over carefully. A very good job, they said at last. Culdee sizzled happily. It's lovely to be sat at home and in steam again, he said. I'm longing to have a run with Catherine. Come on then, said his driver, and they trundled to the shed. Catherine was pleased to see him, and they went for a short run. I've had to go with Lord Harry lately, she said. He takes risks and frightens me. When I warn him, he laughs. Never mind, comforted Culdee. It'll be all right now. Later, he met 2 old friends, Ernest, number 2, and Wilfred, number 3. After some happy gossip, Culdee asked, Who is Lord Harry? He's one of the new engines, they said, who came while you were away. He's number 6. Alaric and Eric are 7 and 8. They're nice quiet engines, but old Harry's a terror. Next afternoon, Lord Harry rolled by with a reluctant coach on his way to the platform. Stupid things, he grumbled. They're all scared of coming with me. You're too reckless, said Culdee. That's why. Rubbish! I'm up to date, that's all. I can go twice your speed in perfect safety. All the same, we don't take such risks on mountain railways. There's no risk. Why, with my superheat... Oh, interrupted Culdee. It's superheat, is it? I'd have said it was conceit myself. Lord Harry snorted furiously away. Ooh, screamed the coach as her wheels ground on the curbs. Be careful. Pah, snorted Lord Harry. I like things to be exciting. Every wise mountain engine knows that you do not take risks, and that points must be taken slowly, for there the rack rail can have no guards. Steady, boy, steady, warned his driver, but Lord Harry paid no attention. He was thinking what he'd say to Culdee next time they met. There's no danger, he boasted, storming up the final slope. That patched-up old ruin was talking nonsense. The telephone rang in the shed, and Culdee's crew were joined by the manager. Lord Harry's off at the summit, he said. We shall have to go and put things right. So they collected some workmen and the tool van and set out at once. It was getting dark when they arrived. Lord Harry's shape loomed against the sky. He had come off at the point and blocked both roads of the station. Wilfred was there with his coach, unable to start his journey back down. The passengers buzzed around Lord Harry like angry bees. He was feeling harassed. The manager pacified the passengers while Culdee buffered up behind to take the strain when the men levered the engine front wheel back onto the rails. Wilfred, he called, who is this wreck? It's Lord Harry, didn't you know? It looks like Harry. It's fat as old Harry, but of course it can't be old Harry. Why ever not? You see, old Harry's an up-to-date engine. He can go twice our speed in perfect safety. See-hee-hee-hee, tittered the coaches. Lord Harry seethed in silence. They pushed Lord Harry out of the way and took the passengers home. Then Culdee helped him back to the shed. It was that coach, sir, blustered Lord Harry. She never... No tails, said the manager sharply. It was your fault, and you know it. You have upset our passengers and damaged yourself by taking risks. We cannot have that on our mountain railway. But, sir, that's enough. You will stay in the shed till we have decided what to do with you. He turned and walked sternly away. Very old engines, bucking bronco. I was lonely and miserable, Skarloey continued, until at last the manager came. I hope now that you're a better engine. Oh yes, sir, please, sir, because I've asked Mr. Bobby to come and look after you. Mr. Bobby had helped to build me in England. I liked him, so he soon had steam up. Come on, Skarloey, he said, we must help the workmen finish the line before the inspector comes. I didn't mind pulling trucks with Mr. Bobby, and we worked so hard that by the time Rheneas arrived, the line was ready. Rheneas never got so excited and bouncy as I did. He worked without hurry or fuss. Trucks often played tricks on me to make me cross, but they soon found that teasing Rheneas was a mistake. He was shunting one day when I came alongside. I was excited. I'm pulling the director's train, I said, and taking the inspector tomorrow. Think of that. Rheneas pondered. You mind your bucks and bounces then, Skarloey, he said at last. The directors won't like them. Pah! I snorted, and bounced away to fetch the coaches. Peep, peep, I whistled. Hello, girls. Who is it? Agnes's deep voice echoed from the back of the shed. It's an engine, whispered Beatrice the guard's van. He's come to take us out. Beware of strange engines, warned Agnes. We must be on our guard. Our guard has just come, giggled Beatrice. Jemima and Ruth, the other coaches, sighed with relief. I pulled them all happily to the station. Agnes, still suspicious, kept muttering, Be on your guard, be on your guard. But I was too excited to listen. It might have been better if I had. I was sizzling with excitement as I ran round and back down on Agnes. It's fun, I chortled. You may look harmless, she whispered, but we'll watch you, we'll watch you. She took me quite aback, but even Agnes couldn't complain about our upward journey. We stopped at every station, and the directors got out to admire the arrangements. Everything went well. I forgot about Agnes, and the manager, smiling, joined us on the footplate for the journey home. It looks so easy, Mr. Bobby, he said, as we rolled gently down. Can I drive him, please? We were running nicely. First rate, I hissed happily, gaining speed, and all unknowing, I began to bounce. The manager, alarmed, closed my regulator, too quickly and too much. Agnes's buffers clashed. He's playing tricks! Bump him, girls, bump him! They surged against me, urging me on. I bounced and I lurched. I couldn't help it. The manager lost his footing, grabbed wildly for a foothold and disappeared. Peep, 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 brakes guard, please. Mr. Bobby seized my controls, stopped the train and looked back. Two legs waved wildly from a bush. The manager was unhurt, but he was very cross. I'll not ride that bucking bronco again, he said. He sat in Beatrice for the rest of the journey. The directors complained that they'd been badly shaken. They said it was my fault. Rheneas will take the inspector tomorrow, they ordered. You will stay out of sight in the shed. But late that evening the manager came. I'm sorry, sir. I did try to be good. It wasn't your fault, Skarloey. I'm sorry I was cross. We must do what the directors say now, but I'll make it up to you later. The inspector was pleased with Rheneas. You've done very well, he said kindly, for a new engine. He told the directors about some improvements which were needed. But, he went on the whole your arrangements are good. He came to see me, and the directors told him what they thought had happened. I think, gentlemen, he said, that you are mistaken. Skarloey should prove to be a useful engine, but he needs another pair of wheels. Take my advice and have them fitted. Then you'll see the difference. Good day. Mainline engines. Edward's exploits. Edward scolded the twins severely, but told Gordon it served him right. Gordon was furious. A few days later some enthusiasts came. On their last afternoon they went to the China Clay Works. Edward found it hard to start the heavy train. Did you see him straining? Asked Henry. Positively painful, remarked James. Just pathetic, grunted Gordon. He should give up and be preserved before it's too late. Shut up, burst out Duck. You're all jealous. Edward's better than any of you. You're right, Duck, said Boko. Edward's old, but he'll surprise us all. Bill and Ben were delighted with their visitors. They loved being photographed and took the party to the workings in a brake van special. On the way home, however, the weather changed. Wind and rain buffeted Edward. His sanding gear failed, his wheels slipped, and his fireman rode in front, dropping sand on the rails by hand. "Come on, come on, come on," panted Edward breathlessly. "This is dreadful." But there was worse to come. Before his driver could check them, his wheels slipped fiercely again and again. With a shrieking crack, something broke and battered his frame and splashes up and out of shape. The passengers gathered round, while the crew inspected the damage. Repairs took some time. "One of your crank pins broke, Edward," said his driver at last. "We've taken your side rods off. Now you're single like an old-fashioned engine. Can you get these people home? They must start back tonight." "I'll try, sir," promised Edward. They backed down to where the line was more nearly level. Edward puffed and pulled his hardest, but his wheels kept slipping and he just could not start the heavy train. The passengers were getting anxious. Driver, fireman and guard went along the train making adjustments between the coaches. "We've loosened the couplings, Edward," they said. "Now you can pick your coaches up one by one, just as you do with trucks." "That will be much easier," said Edward gratefully. So with the fireman sanding carefully in front, the driver gently opened the regulator. "Come on," puffed Edward. He moved cautiously forward, ready to take the strain as his tender coupling tightened against the weight of the first coach. The first coach moving helped to start the second helped the third, and so on down the train. I've done it, puffed Edward, his wheels spinning with excitement. "Steady, boy," warned his driver, skillfully checking the wheel slip. "Well done, boy. You've got them. And he listened happily to Edward's steady beat as he forged slowly but surely up the hill. The passengers were thrilled. Most had their heads out of windows. They waved and shouted, cheering Edward on. The Fat Controller paced the platform. Henry with the special train waited anxiously too. They heard a peep peep. Then, battered, weary but unbeaten, Edward steamed in. The Fat Controller stepped angrily forward. He pointed to the clock, but excited passengers swept him aside. They cheered Edward, his driver and fireman to the echo before rushing off to get in Henry's train. Henry steamed away to another storm of cheers, but not before everyone knew Edward's story. Edward went thankfully to the shed, while Duck and Boko saw to it that he was left in peace. Gordon and James remained respectfully silent. The Fat Controller asked Boko to look after Edward's line while he was being mended. Boko was pleased. He worked well, and now they run it together. Bill and Ben still tease him, but Boko doesn't mind. He lives at Edward's station, but is welcome anywhere, for he is now one of the family. Donald and Douglas were the last to accept him, but he often helps with their goods trains, and the other day they were heard to remark, "For a diesel, yon Boko's nae such a bad engine." That, from the Caledonian twins, is high praise indeed. Small railway engines, tit for tat. The engines were being cleaned and polished for the day. Bert, who was going out first, had a tall chimney in his funnel to draw up his fire. "We've got visitors today," said his driver. Rex yawned. "We have them every day," grunted Mike. "But these are special," said the driver. "One takes moving pictures and the other writes books, so mind that you all behave." "I don't want to be a moving picture in a book," protested Bert. "I want to stay as I am." They all tried to explain, but Bert was still muddled when he took his train. The visitors were clergymen, one fat, the other thin. They arrived in a little car. Both had cameras. They shook hands with Bert's driver. "The small controller," he told them, "says you can ride with me in Bert's tender if you like." "Thank you," they said. "May we come later, please? Just now the sun is shining so nicely that we want to take photographs." Then they asked Bert his name and told him how smart he looked. These visitors, he thought, do at least know how to speak to engines. He puffed away feeling happier. Wherever the line came near the road, level crossings, bridges, stations, there the two clergymen were, squinting into their cameras. Bert found this rather upsetting. "They might wave at an engine," he complained. "They can't wave and get good pictures," said his driver, but Bert didn't understand. He thought they were being unfriendly. Barp, barp. The little car shot past them once more, but Bert made no reply. "They'll be at the lane next." The lane is a side road. It runs for a short distance alongside the railway. There is no fence. It had rained hard in the night. There were puddles in the lane. The thin clergyman sat in the car. The fat one waited with his camera. He took his pictures, jumped in, and off they went, racing to the train to the lane's end. Unluckily, just as they passed Bert, they went through a puddle. Slosh! Muddy water squashed all over Bert's boiler. Ouch! Said Bert. But the clergyman didn't know. They were ahead and out of the car. Smiling, they waited for Bert to catch up. Bert wasn't smiling. They did it on purpose, he snorted crossly. They splashed me! They splashed me! Bert hissed, rolling into the last station. Pictures indeed, he grumbled, running round his train. I'm a nice picture, covered in mud. He sizzled crossly when the fat clergyman sat in his tender for the journey back. Driver ought to allow him after what he's done. Suddenly he stopped sizzling and let off steam. Whoosh! I know, he thought, how to pay the fat one out. It's a lovely plan. I only wish the thin one was there too, he said. But he said it to himself. Bert ran nicely till they reached the woods. The line climbs steeply here. Bert usually rushes the hill. This time he deliberately dawdled. Come on, said his driver, giving him full steam. This was just what Bert wanted. Tit for tat, he shouted, storming up the slope. Rain-soaked branches met close overhead. Bert's blast, shouting straight up, shook them wildly. Showers of water fell on the clergyman and driver. Their soaking did not stop till they had topped the rise, and steam could be reduced for the downward run. The small controller soon found out what had happened. He sent Bert back to the shed. You're a very naughty engine, he said sternly. I won't have rudeness to visitors. They splashed me, faltered Bert. That's no excuse. I'm ashamed of you. Bert went sadly away. But he was happy again when Rex and Mike came in. Those visitors are nice, he told them. They came and said sorry, and I said sorry too. Then they cleaned me like Driver does. They know lots about engines, he went on. The thin one's writing about me in a book. He promised he'd write about you too. Think of that. Enterprising Engines, Little Western. Douglas arrived just in time to see Flying Scotsman take his enthusiasts home. The fat controller said they had all been honoured, and thanked Flying Scotsman and his owner for their help. Please tell everyone, he went on, that whatever happens elsewhere, steam will still be at work here. We shall be glad to welcome all who want to see and travel behind real engines. This announcement was greeted with cheers, and Flying Scotsman departed to the strains of Will you no come back again, led as one might expect by Donald and Douglas. At last, Douglas could tell his news. They were all excited about it, and agreed that something must be done for Oliver. I'm feared, said Donald, some murdering diesel may creep him, and him there alone lacking steam even to whistle for help. You're right, said James, it won't be safe till the fat controller knows. Douglas should tell him at once, said Gordon firmly. Is it me to speak to the fat controller? It's forward he'd think me and maybe interfering. Well, here he is, said a cheerful voice. Now what's this all about? Duck broke the awkward silence. Beg pardon, sir, but we do need another engine. I agree, Duck. That is why I'm giving 7101 another chance. Their faces showed such dismay that the fat controller had difficulty with his own. Sir, ventured Gordon at last, we had hoped for a real engine. They, said the fat controller gravely, are rare, and unless one escapes, there's little hope. But sir, burst out Donald, one has... And thanks to Douglas, is now at our works, announced the fat controller. Sir, gasped Douglas, is there anything ye don't know? More than you think, he laughed. Oliver's crew told me all you did, Douglas. Och, sir, you couldn't see a brave wee engine, and him in trouble, and no do a wheel's turn. More than a wheel's turn, I fancy, Douglas. I'm pleased with you. Oliver, Isabel and Toad will soon be ours. Oliver and Isabel are just what we need for Duck's branch line. Loud cheers greeted this announcement, and Toad wants to be the brake van, Douglas. Thank you, sir. I'd hoped for that. He and I'll do brawly together. That, of course, made everything right. Henry spoke a good word for 7101, and the others gave him a great welcome. He had good manners for a start, so Henry didn't find it hard to teach him our ways. 7101 finds them difficult from those of the other railway, but much more interesting. He is now quite a useful engine. They teased him at first because of his growls. They said he was like a bear. He still growls. not because he is cross, but because he can't help it. His name, Bear, has stuck. He likes it. It's nicer than just having a number, he says. Having a name means that you really belong. The Fat Controller soon had Oliver, Isabel and Toad mended and painted in full Great Western colours. Then he rescued 3 more Western auto coaches. 2, Alice and Mirabel, he gave to Duck. The 3rd, Dulcie, joined Oliver and Isabel. Duck and Oliver are happy on their branch line. It runs along the coast to the small railway. We reopen branches, they boast. They are very proud of this indeed. The others laughed at first and called their branch the Little Western. Duck and Oliver were delighted, and now no one ever thinks of calling it anything else. Oliver the Western Engine. Bulgy. It was Bank Holiday morning. The small railway engines were working hard. Their station was crowded. No sooner had one train started than another was filled with people waiting to go. Duck, Oliver, Donald and Douglas were busy too, but they had not brought everybody. The yard was full of parked cars and coaches. Duck was waiting for his next turn. Alice and Mirabel complained of the heat, so he backed them into a goods shed while he basked outside in the sun. Near him stood a huge red bus. He had never seen it before. The bus watched the happy passengers milling round the small railway. "Stupid nonsense," he grumbled. "Wouldn't have brought them if I'd known. I'd have had a breakdown or something." "I'm glad you didn't," smiled Duck. "You'd have spoilt their fun. Look how they're enjoying themselves." "Pah!" snorted the bus. "Enjoyment's all you engines live for, taking the petrol from the tanks of us workers. Come the revolution," he went on fiercely, "railways will be ripped up. Cars and coaches, I'll trample their remains. Free the roads," he growled. "Free all the roads from railway tyranny." At the passing station, Duck told Oliver all about the bus. "I call him Bulgy," he chuckled. "He's painted bright red and shouts 'Down with railways.'" But next time they met, Oliver didn't laugh. "Bulgy's friend has come," he said. "He's red and rude too. He's taking Bulgy's passengers home, so he's to leave him free to steal ours." "But he can't," objected Duck. "Ours want to go to the big station. Bulgy bets he can get there before us." "Rubbish! It's much further by road." Oliver looked anxious. "Yes, but Bulgy says he knows a shortcut." That evening Donald, Oliver and Duck were preparing for the homeward rush. But Duck's train was to be first out, and he had few passengers. He was soon to know why. "Look!" shrilled Oliver. "Look at Bulgy! He's a mean scarlet deceiver!" Bulgy had turned to leave. They could now see his other side. It had on it "Railway Bus." "Stop!" yelled staff and engines, but too late. "Yaboo snubs!" jeered Bulgy as he roared away. The unsuspecting passengers waved happily. "Come on!" puffed Duck. He, Alice and Mirabel trundled unhappily away. Alice and Mirabel chattered crossly. "That nasty old thief! He's stolen all our people!" Duck wondered how to pay Bulgy out. Then far ahead, a man clambered up the embankment waving a red scarf. "Danger!" he shouted. "The line here crosses a narrow road." Duck came as close as he could. "So this was Bulgy's shortcut," he chuckled. Bulgy was wedged under the bridge. Drivers of cars trapped in front and behind were telling him what they thought. Angry passengers cornering the conductor demanded their money back. From time to time loosened bricks fell, making Bulgy yelp. Bulgy's passengers swarmed round Duck. "He tricked us," they complained. "He said he was a railway bus, but wouldn't accept our return tickets. He wanted to think us that railways are no good. Please help us." Duck's crew examined the bridge. "It's risky," they said, "but we must help the passengers." "Passengers are urgent," agreed Duck. "Besides," he chuckled, "it'll pay Bulgy out." They laughed and told the passengers to wait on the other side of the bridge. "Stop!" wailed Bulgy. "It might fall on me." "That," said Duck severely, "would serve you right for telling whoppers." Bulgy howled as he felt the bridge quiver, but it didn't collapse. Duck made good time to the big station, and all passengers caught their trains. The Fat Controller arranged a shuttle service on the branch. Passengers changed trains at Bulgy's bridge. Bulgy had to stay till it was mended, but he never learnt sense. He told lies till no one could believe his destination boards, and no passengers would travel in him. He's a henhouse now, in a field beside the railway. If he still tells lies, they can do no harm. The hens never listened to them anyway. Duke the Lost Engine. Sleeping Beauty. Duke's story soon spread. The engines told Mr. Hugh told the fin controller told the owner told his Grace told the small controller told the fin clergyman, and the fin clergyman told the fat one. That is why one morning the two clergymen and the small controller were looking at maps. Our railway, said the small controller, is laid on the bed of the old one, but swings round to the end at the road south of that village. The old line kept straight on. It went north of the village and then to the mountains. The map shows the works at the old station. If Duke is anywhere, he's there. Are you writing another book, sir? Oh, yes, said the thin clergyman, but not about you. He smiled at their downcast faces. Cheer up, he went on. It's about a nice old engine who is lost. But if you're good, the artist might put you in the pictures. Oh, thank you, sir. So the clergyman told them about Duke and Falcon and Stuart. So you see, he continued, poor Duke was left alone. The three engines sighed sympathetically. And we want to find him and mend him and make him happy again. Your controller wants to help, but he can't if you're naughty. 3 small engines promised to be as good as gold. The 3 men spent days and days at the old station. They came up every morning on Bert's train. He always whistled good luck as they walked up the track, but they had nothing in the evening except scratches and torn clothes. They wouldn't give up though. Duke's there somewhere, they said. The fat clergyman found him in the end. Scrambling over a hillock, he trod on something which wasn't there, crashed through a hole and landed legs astride on Duke's saddle tank. Our Sleeping Beauty himself, he shouted. The thin clergyman and the small controller peeped through the hole above. Excuse me, inquired Duke, are you a vandal? Driver told me vandals break in and smash things. The fat clergyman ruefully felt his bruises. Bless you, no, he laughed. I'm quite respectable. I dropped in because I couldn't find your door. And he told Duke about Falcon and Stuart. So they did remember, said Duke softly then. Does his Grace approve? Oh yes, he's coming. To see me? How kind. And I'm all dirty, that will never do. Please clean me. So they set to work, and by the time the small controller had fetched his Grace, Duke was the cleanest of anyone in the shed. Early next morning, Mike brought the workmen and tools. They enlarged the fat clergyman's hole, lifted Duke out, and put him on a low loader to take him away by road. I'd be ashamed, Duke protested, to travel by road. It's undignified. I'm sorry, Duke, said his Grace, but the small railway has no suitable trucks. Duke gave in then, but so many people came out and greeted him that he felt better. So they still remember me, he thought happily. Donald was waiting with a flat truck. Everyone cheered when Duke was lifted onto it, and still more when he started along the big railway on the last stage of his journey to his new home. Peter, Sam and Sir Handel were on early turn. They peeped out of the shed. He's there, they whispered. Shh. Duke opened his eyes. You woke me, he grumbled. In my young days engines were seen and not heard, Grandpuff. Remember? I remember, said Duke. 2 idle good-for-nothings called Falcon and Stuart. Good for you, Grandpuff. We're glad you've come. We can keep you in order now. Keep me in order? Impertinence, be off with you. The pair chuffed away, well content. Impudent scallywags, murmured Duke, but his old eyes twinkled, and for the first time in years he smiled as he dozed in the sun. Tramway Engines. Mavis. Mavis is a diesel engine belonging to the Farquhar Quarry Company. They bought her to shunt trucks in their sidings. She is black and has 6 wheels. These, like Toby's, are hidden by side plates. Mavis is young and full of her own ideas. She is sure they are better than anybody else's. She loves rearranging things and put Toby's trucks in different places every day. This made Toby cross. Trucks, he grumbled, should be where you want them, when you want them. Fudge, said Mavis and flounced away. At last Toby lost patience. I can't waste time playing hunt the trucks with you, he snapped. Take 'em yourself. Mavis was delighted. Taking trucks made her feel important. At Farquhar, she met Daisy. Toby's an old fusspot, she complained. Daisy liked Toby, but was glad of a diesel to talk to. Steam engines, she said, have their uses, but they don't understand. Toby says only steam engines can manage trucks properly." "What rubbish," put in Daisy, who knew nothing about trucks. "Depend upon it, my dear, anything steam engines do, we diesels can do better." Toby's line crosses the main road behind Farquhar Station, and for a short way follows a farm lane. The rails here are buried in earth and ashes and almost to their tops. In wet weather, animals, carts, and tractors make the line muddy and slippery. Frost makes the mud rock hard too. It swells it too, preventing engines' wheels from gripping the rails properly. Toby found this place troublesome, so when frost came, he warned Mavis and told her just what to do. "I can manage, thank you," she said cheekily. "I'm not an old fusspot like you." The trucks were tired of being pushed around by Mavis. "It's slippery," they whispered. "Let's push her around instead." On, they yelled, as Mavis reached the stop board, but Mavis had heard about Percy and took no chances. She brought them carefully down to the lane and stopped at the level crossing. There, her second man halted up the traffic while the guard unpinned the wagon brakes. "One in the headlamp for old fusspot Toby," she chortled. She looked forward to having a good giggle about it with Daisy, but she never got her giggle. She was so sure she was right that she'd stopped in the wrong place. In frosty weather, Toby stops before reaching the lane, and while some of his trucks are still on the slope, this ensures that they can't hold him back, and their weight helps him forward till his wheels can grip again. But Mavis had given the trucks the chance they wanted. Hold back, they giggled. "Grrr, up," ordered Mavis. The trucks just laughed, and her wheels spun helplessly. She tried backing, but the same thing happened. They sanded the rails and tried to dig away the frozen mud, but only broke the spade. Cars and lorries tooted impatiently. "Grrr, ah," wailed Mavis in a helpless fury. "I warned her," fumed Toby. "I told her just where to stop. I can manage, she said, and called me an old fusspot." "She's young yet," soothed his driver, "and she can manage her trucks herself." "They're your trucks, really," his driver pointed out. "Mavis isn't supposed to come down here. If the Fat Controller—" "You wouldn't tell, would you?" "Of course not." "Well then, but," his driver went on, "if we don't help clear the lines soon, he'll know about it, and so shall we." Yes," said Toby thoughtfully. An angry farmer was just telling Mavis what she could do with her train. Toby buffered up. "Having trouble, Mavis? I am surprised." "Grrr," said Mavis. With much puffing and wheel slip, Toby pushed the trucks back. Mavis hardly helped at all. The hard work made Toby's fire burn fiercely. He then reversed, stopping at intervals while his firemen spread hot cinders to melt the frozen mud. "Goodbye," he called as he reached the crossing. "You'll manage now, I expect." Mavis didn't answer. She took the trucks to the shed and scuttled home as quickly as she could.